So at its simplest, transhumanism is simply the idea that human beings can and should use technology to improve the human condition. If the goal of the gods is to create other gods, beings capable of independent thought, moral agency, and eventually participation in creation itself, then the method matters enormously. We have been transhuman from the beginning. We are not meant to go backward to the garden. We are meant to go forward to the city. Glad you guys could come out. This presentation that I'm going to give today, I prepared for a trip that we took to Africa. We were invited to participate in a global congress of transhumanists about African development and how the concepts in transhumanism might be beneficial to Africa. And that was really fun. And while we were there, we met with some members of the church. And it was, we had a little fireside with them, and I shared some of these ideas at that fireside. Some of the,
I don't know where
like,
but you can show me.
sorry, Siri, sometimes.
Africa, it was Africa.
Anyway, so some of the slide decorations and stuff you'll notice have a bit of an African flair to them. I was trying to get it ready for that. But these concepts are some of the things we really enjoy discussing in the MTA, and some things that I hope you find interesting. So I'd like to primarily address the remarks today to my fellow Latter-day Saints, and explain why you might be interested in something called transhumanism. That word might sound strange at first, but when you understand it properly, you'll see that it's deeply familiar to anyone who's been raised in the church. So at its simplest, transhumanism is simply the idea that human beings can and should use technology to improve the human condition, to overcome our limitations and enhance our well-being. It takes seriously the possibility that we are not finished products, but beings in process, capable of becoming more than we currently are. Wilford Woodruff said, "If there was a point where humanity in its progression could not proceed any further, the very idea would throw a gloom over every intelligent and reflecting mind. Our heavenly parents are increasing and progressing in knowledge, power, and dominion, and will do so worlds without end. It is just so with us." You'll notice a couple of these quotes, I've modernized the language just a tad, and I have no regrets about doing that. So I don't bother to stick the square brackets on the quote just trying to get this in. So for if there was references to God, for example, I would try to emphasize the Mormon conception of God by using heavenly parents there. So does that sound familiar to you guys? This is the doctrine of eternal progression. Transhumanism, as we understand it, is simply the application of this principle to our present circumstances. The term comes from the Latin trans, meaning across or beyond. And to be transhuman, therefore, is not to be static. It is to be in transition. And isn't that exactly what mortality is? So let me take you back to the very origins of our existence. In the book of Abraham, we find a remarkable account of the creation. Unlike Genesis, which emphasizes God speaking and things instantly appearing, Abraham's vision shows us something different. The gods are counseling together here, and they're organizing materials, and then here's the key phrase: they're watching those things which they had ordered until they obeyed. The gods did not simply command and receive instant compliance. They established conditions and then they waited as things unfolded. They gave space for maturity to emerge. This tells us something profound. If the goal of the gods is to create other gods, beings capable of independent thought, moral agency, and eventually participation in creation itself, then the method matters enormously. You cannot produce genuine autonomy through micromanagement. Gods who wish to create creators must step back enough to allow their creations space to develop, to struggle, to choose, and to ultimately become. Our universe is designed not primarily to minimize suffering, but to foster conditions in which ever-increasing complexity, intelligence, and moral agency can emerge naturally. This hints at a response to common complaints about God's apparent non-intervention. If God readily prevented every hardship, the very goal of helping us achieve theosis would be thwarted. We would remain forever children. And so we find ourselves here, the product of billions of years of cosmic evolution. Stars forming and exploding, planets coalescing, life emerging and growing ever more complex. All of it part of the God's patient work of creating the conditions in which beings like us could emerge and begin our journey toward becoming like them. You might also notice that I use the term the gods there. I think it's really interesting that in the book of Abraham, we have this concept of God as being plural. And if we look at Joseph Smith's theological development as he was receiving this revelation, he was studying with a guy named Professor Seixas, who was this Portuguese Hebrew scholar, and he was teaching them Hebrew. And Joseph Smith was interested in the way the story of Genesis uses the term Elohim to talk about God, right? And that is a plural form. And so it really is saying the gods. And so Joseph was like, well, okay, if we're going to have the story of the creation, we got to have the gods, right? So it's interesting to see that that story tells of a council of beings and not just a single being involved in that. Here is something that might surprise you. We have been transhuman from the beginning. Our wielding of controlled fire enabled us to cook our food, modifying our very anatomy and allowing us to develop larger brains. Fire literally changed our bodies and made us capable of greater intelligence. Our invention of clothing allowed us to spread throughout the globe. Our use of tools is a core characteristic separating us from other animals. So when I talk about technology, a lot of folks think I'm talking about iPhones and computers and, I don't know, fancy high-tech things. But I love talking about really old technologies, right? Because that really puts into perspective what it means to be human, actually. We think of technology as something futuristic, but a stone knife is technology, writing is technology, agriculture, the printing press, antibiotics are all technology. And it extends beyond physical tools as well. So religion, arts, culture, law, governance, these are social technologies that enable us to organize ourselves in new ways. The church itself, with its wards and stakes, its callings and councils, is a social technology for building Zion. The most effective technologies fade into the background until we no longer notice them. They become extensions of ourselves. And this has been happening for as long as there have been humans. So we're not always used to thinking of all of these things as technologies, but if you think about some age when maybe early humans, prehistoric times, before they had fully formed the complex organizations we have today, maybe they were bartering for things because they didn't have money yet, right? Something like money. All of these things are technologies, even though we don't think of them like we think of this, right? In Latter-day Saint theology, we have a unique understanding of the fall. Unlike traditions that view Adam and Eve's choice as purely tragic, we see it as a necessary step forward. Adam fell that men might be, and men are that they might have joy. Eve partook of the fruit so humanity could gain knowledge of good and evil, and we honor her for that courageous choice. The fall was, in an important sense, a rise, an ascent into greater awareness and moral responsibility. Whether we understand Eden as a literal place or as a profound symbol of humanity's emergence into moral awareness, the pattern is the same. We began in innocence and we transitioned into knowledge, choice, and accountability. With that knowledge came the capacity for greater harm as well as greater good, but also everything we value most: love freely given, virtue genuinely chosen, and the capacity to become like our heavenly parents. Many people yearn to return to a simpler past, to undo the fall and recover lost innocence. But Scripture doesn't promise us a return to Eden. It promises something better: the city of Zion, a celestial kingdom we build through our labors, guided by divine grace. We are not meant to go backward to the garden. We are meant to go forward to the city. Paleological evidence confirms there never was a golden age of innocence. Research shows that as soon as our ancestors developed the capability to impact their environment, they did so, often devastatingly driving megafauna to extinction across all the continents. The fall brought with it the capacity for both great harm and great good. Cain slew Abel in the very first generation. There is no Eden to return to, only Zion to build. So this brings me to a teaching from Brigham Young that captures the essence of what we're about in the MTA. He says, he said actually that a lot of people ask him what heaven is like. And he said, "Allow me to inform you that you are in the midst of it all now, that you are in just as good a kingdom as you will ever attain to from now to all eternity, unless you make it yourselves by the grace of God, by the will of God, by the eternal priesthood of God, which is a code of laws perfectly calculated to govern and control eternal matter. If you and I do not by this means make that better kingdom which we anticipate, we shall never enjoy it. We can only enjoy the kingdom we have labored to make." I really like that. If you think about it, if you were zapped into the celestial kingdom, but you had no prior preparation for that, you would be like completely lost. It kind of reminds me of this funny 80s comedy that was called The Greatest American Hero. I don't know if anyone here is old enough to remember this, but it's about this guy who's a superhero, but like he lost the instruction manual that he got from the aliens. So he's sort of like always saving the day, but kind of like completely confused as well in the process. I sort of think of what that might, like that show is what it might be like to go to heaven without without having the instruction manual. So we have to build the thing if we want to be able to know how to use it. And the celestial kingdom is not somewhere else just waiting for us to get there. It must be made by us through divine grace according to eternal laws. Heaven is not merely a reward to be received, it is a project to be undertaken. Think about how the early saints built temples. They didn't wait for angels to construct them. They quarried stone, fired bricks, they carved wood. Using the best technology available, God revealed the design, the saints built it with their hands. And the same principle applied. So here's another interesting idea. We usually think of technology as helping us with physical or intellectual tasks. But what if technology could also help us become more virtuous? Recently, scientists developed medications for diabetes that unexpectedly helped people lose weight by reducing appetite. Everyone's like, they're super popular right now. They're selling like crazy. They're called GLP-1 agonists or inhibitors, and you might know them as like tirzepatide. Jordan. Semaglutide, yeah. Our resident doctor has, I'm sure, recommended these in some cases. But what's interesting about this is something surprising happened when some of these folks started taking it. Patients reported reduced cravings for alcohol. People who had struggled for years with drinking found it easier to quit. Others reported less interest in gambling or other compulsive behaviors. Researchers also discovered these medications have rejuvenating effects on various organ systems. So what is happening here? Our ancestors developed in environments of scarcity. The drive to consume calorie-dense foods was adaptive, Those who stored fat survived famines. But in environments of abundance, these same drives work against us. We're running outdated software, if you will. These medications help update that software, modulating the brain's reward systems to reduce cravings. So users describe feeling more in control, more able to make choices aligned with their values. Some might object to this. They might say, like, isn't this cheating? But we don't think eyeglasses are cheating at seeing. We accept that our bodies have limitations. So why treat the brain any differently? The scriptures teach that the spirit is indeed willing, but the flesh is weak. So what if technology could strengthen the flesh so the willing spirit can prevail? This doesn't replace spiritual development. It creates conditions where it can happen more effectively. So let me paint some pictures of what might be possible as we build heaven. Cities for human flourishing. Urban planners are developing what they call 15-minute cities, where all daily necessities are accessible within a 15-minute walk or bike ride. Instead of building around automobiles, these communities prioritize more efficient and humane forms of transport, like walking, cycling, buses, and trains. This is how cities developed before the automobile age. Ivory Coast and other African nations, this is what I was saying to them, have the opportunity to leapfrog the mistakes of car-dependent societies, to build cities for people rather than vehicles, creating communities that foster connection, health, and sustainability rather than isolation, pollution, and congestion. So we could have abundant clean energy. Solar power is becoming way cheaper than ever. Across Africa, which is blessed with abundant sunshine, solar is now often the cheapest electricity source. We also have on the horizon nuclear fusion, which may eventually provide virtually limitless clean energy. For a long time, scientists have been saying that it's like 30 years away, but now they're saying like it's 5 years or less away. It's really getting close, and a lot of breakthroughs are happening. I think the latest thing I heard was that like they've sustained a fusion reaction for more than 22 minutes now. So it's really, really getting close. So the Doctrine and Covenants says that the earth is full and there is enough and to spare. Abundant clean energy could be how this divine promise becomes reality for all of God's children. And one thing I want to say on that is that like everything is made with energy. Like all the stuff that our houses are built out of, the clothes we wear, the cars we drive, all of those things they take energy to manufacture. And if that energy suddenly becomes 10 times cheaper or 100 times cheaper, it means that like 2/3 or 3/4 of the cost of all the goods that we currently buy is like going to just go away. And eventually, competition will force those prices down. So that could be really amazing for all of society. We could also have food without scarcity. So there are some types of crops that work really well in what we call vertical farms. And these farms use they use much less water, like 90% less water. They can also be indoors in controlled environments where you don't even have to worry about, using pesticides because they're all contained. And they can be way more land efficient as well. And even in crops that like maybe aren't quite as suited for vertical farming, they've got these robots that are zapping weeds instead of having to spray crops and stuff like that. So there's all sorts of neat things happening. We could also have longer life and healthier lives. So researchers right now are targeting the fundamental mechanisms of aging. Somebody at the Harvard Medical Center named David Sinclair is talking about how some of the treatments that they have that are essentially rewinding cells, not all the way to stem cell state, but like to sort of an intermediate state. I guess what they've come to the conclusion, he says most researchers now agree that there are various theories about how aging occurs, but what they say is the sort of consensus now is that essentially our cells are losing some of there's genetic drift that is occurring in the cells that's causing the cells not to be as energy efficient and to work as well as young cells do. And so they have treatments that they've already done in lab animals that rewind their cells and like make them essentially like 10 years younger, or the mouse equivalent of 10 human years, right? And so they're imagining that after clinical trials, which are starting really soon here, that this could be a treatment that's available for people. So maybe in 5 to 10 years or so. So for Latter-day Saints, this resonates with that scriptural promise of patriarchs living centuries or millennial people living to the age of a tree. Resurrection also we could think of as a cooperative work. I called it celestial forensics here. So our theology affirms that the body is literally resurrected. But here's something remarkable. Brigham Young taught that we ourselves would participate in resurrecting our deceased loved ones. And Joseph Smith said that we must learn to be gods by going from one small degree to another until you attain to the resurrection of the dead. So he said, not until you receive it, but until you attain to it, as if it's something that you have to work towards. It's not just something that's done to us. So, like I said, I call this idea celestial forensics. We're already becoming the gatherers of what we might think of as sacred evidence. We're preserving like photos of our loved ones. We're digitizing letters. We're recording stories. And we're saving the patterns of their lives. But that same spirit of Elijah that sends us to dusty archives and cemetery records may someday send us to like quantum computers or DNA synthesizers, or ways of recovering lost information. The information is still there. Patterns leave traces. The universe remembers, and we're learning degree by degree to participate with God in the defeat of death itself. So I want to share like a glimpse of what I'm talking about there. Back in the 2000s, this company called Zenf Studios, they developed this algorithm that could scan like dusty old 78 RPM record and listen to like recordings of Rachmaninoff and really other famous pianists like playing their own works. And they were able to digitize these and then figure out what notes were being played and what pedals were being pressed, and then play them back on like 9-foot, beautiful grand piano with a perfect recording. And so we now can hear these composers playing their own works who are long dead. And it was the information that was like poorly recorded on those really scratchy records that still was enough information to recover the performance of these artists. And that is like in a small way what I'm thinking of here, is that as our ability to see into the distant past improves, we might gain more and more traces of people who have lived before us. So the Mormon Transhumanist Association is a community that takes seriously both the restored gospel and the possibilities of science and technology. And we believe that God expects us to use every tool available to build the kingdom, and that heaven is not elsewhere but here, waiting to be made real by our labor, guided by divine grace. We don't worship technology. We recognize every powerful tool can be used for good or ill, but we refuse to be afraid of progress. We refuse to retreat into nostalgia for a golden age that never existed. The gods watched and waited as their creations matured. The fall was not a tragic mistake. It was the beginning of our journey toward Godhood. That journey continues today as we learn, grow, create, and build. We cannot return to Eden, but we can, with God's help, build Zion. As Brigham Young taught, we can only enjoy the kingdom we have labored to make. So let us labor then, and let us learn, and let us build. Heaven is not somewhere else. It is here in Provo, Utah, in every place where God's children dwell, waiting to emerge from our faithful work. Thank you. So the floor is yours. What's on your mind, guys? What are you thinking about after all that? And are there any questions?
I like that last line of, we can't return to Eden, but we can build Zion. That's
Thank you.
beautiful.
Thank you.
Nor should we want to return to Eden.
Yeah, like what, that would be so strange, right? I almost think it would be like, how can you go back from knowing something to not knowing it, right?
And why would you want to? I guess it was super traumatic.
Yeah, like some folks say ignorance is bliss, right? I don't
There
know.
are some cases.
So if we create a world, do we have to have yet another fall for our spiritual children?
Well, I do feel like, as I was saying earlier, there are some things that can't be easily outsourced about Godhood. It's funny how, as I mentioned briefly, a lot of folks will complain about the idea that, and I'm not saying that maybe there's not a better way to do some things, but the like common refrain about those who doubt about the existence of God is that, why would any God create a universe as suboptimal as this one, right? They're just thinking there's got to be a better way. And I know some folks here, because I know you well, including you. I know some folks here, that resonates with them, right? But I also feel that when you pry into that question and that concern, and you ask people like, well, how would you want it to be different? They're almost always saying things like, oh, well, I just would want someone to create a world in which like bad things don't happen. And you're like, okay, so you want someone to go around and like force everyone not to do bad things, and it almost always comes down to something around like removal of agency and autonomy. And what's also really strange to me is that a lot of folks they have a strange conception of God in that a God would be the kind of being that, in my opinion, wouldn't need help from anyone else. A God that is dependent on other creatures or other things. There might be like a cooperative conception of God. I don't want to take away from that, but what I would say is that if you have real gods, you can throw them in any situation and they will figure out how to make it better, right? And that's kind of what I think of when I think of God. I don't think of a being that is in need of constant assistance. And so in order to make a truly independent, for a creator to truly create other creators, I think that involves letting people figure things out to some extent. I don't know how you could avoid that, really.
Well, if you're going to allow them to be creators, they might create another solution that's not the same Eden.
It's possible.
Right, and in order to create creators, you do have to be open to that possibility that they create something that's entirely different, or they might even adopt a goal that's entirely different.
Yeah.
Because freedom can be so vast.
Totally. In fact, Richard Bushman, the author of Rough Stone Rollings, was one of our keynote speakers at a conference that took place in 2013, where he said, like, a lot of LDS thinkers have speculated about this concept, and they've said, are we just like rediscovering everything God has already discovered, and all we're doing is like, it's exactly what he did, and it's super boring because he's just watching us all do the same thing. And there were various theories proposed on that. And one of them was that, like, we are doing exactly that, and there's nothing new to learn. Another theory was that, I don't actually remember what the third theory was, but the one that he liked, and that resonates with me is that if you think about it, like, every universe is going to have some common similarities, right? You're going to have like resources that are somewhat limited, people or individuals acting independently and then trying to figure out how to use those resources. And so, so I think that their experiences would be somewhat similar. The experiences of different civilizations emerging in different parts of the universe or whatever would probably overlap in some ways. But also, there probably are going to be some unique things that each civilization develops. And we can see that in our own planet, right? We see different cultures, and each culture has its own flair for how things are done, right? And they're good at some things, and maybe other cultures are better at other things. And so I think in a similar way, like the idea is that there may be some point in the future where civilizations come in contact with each other. It's the same as it happened on our planet with the Age of Discovery, when all these, clashes of cultures, and that at some point they're going to confer with each other and probably like have interesting, sessions where they kind of like compare notes with each other. And he likes to think of heaven as having this vast library of the contributions of each civilization, each planet, if you will, each dispensation, right? And I think that's a really interesting idea. Yeah.
For those of you who are interested in that topic from a secular perspective, I recommend Nick Bostrom's latest paper called Cosmic Host. That's part of the title, at least. Google it. Nick Bostrom is probably the most influential transhumanist philosopher alive today. He wrote a paper, part of the title is Cosmic Host. The idea is that he's exploring this question of how do different intelligent civilizations, how might they vary and how might they converge? It's a very thoughtful paper, and I'll kind of give away the end. The end will resonate very strongly with Mormon transhumanists. He does believe in convergence, let's say that.
And Nathan, yeah.
I was just thinking there's a paradox in the idea of like letting certain people and creatures like develop their own pathway, so they can learn on their own and maybe find different solutions. But at the same time, we're born into a period of time we have no control over. We're like now people. I think about the journey I took into my career in software engineering. Like it's not a path that people can take today because you're born with AI and you can ask it questions and it can write code for you.
And half our skills are dead now.
Exactly. Like it's really, and I feel like I don't know that you can become an artist the same way people became an artist.
Sure. One really interesting thing about that particular issue is I've also seen people recently saying, like, I've learned more in the last 6 months than about how to do new software engineering things. Like other software engineers saying that AI has assisted them to learn a lot more rapidly than they could before.
I would agree with that. I think it helps you get to MVPs really quickly.
Right. I mean, because often I'll see the solution just to double check that it's what I actually wanted. And I'm like, hey, that's really good. Well done. Like you do learn some things in the process. But I agree with you that like the way we learned back then is just not going to happen the same, Yeah.
For those interested in learning about this, creators and creators and looking at new possibilities, you should read Stephen Peck on God creating novelty and reality creating novelty. In particular, a lovely place to start is Science, the Key to Theology. So
yeah, he's another BYU professor and LDS scholar for those who haven't heard him. Yeah, any other ideas, guys? Yeah, Jordan.
Oh, I saw a hand go.
Yeah, you probably. I think you've been.
I just we can't not be eternal. I feel that it's like sometimes we talk about a mortal life or an eternal life. It's like we're in eternal life.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you can't not be eternal if you're eternal. And so the story of Adam and Eve, whether it's a story or a history or a mythology, at least the symbology is at some point in our progression, we realized ignorance is a poor choice.
Yeah.
And we want to do something different and have some kind of stress. And so we enter this phase or this dimension or this world so that we can learn something that we weren't, it doesn't seem like we were able to learn it elsewhere. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't have chosen the suffering.
Yeah, in fact, you kind of remind me of one of the scriptures that Restoration Scripture says, like, it refers to the name Adam as meaning many, which kind of hints at the fact that, like,
And
that may be an archetypal, story that's really referring not just to two individuals, but to the emergence of cognizant humanity, right? Yeah, real.
Yeah, on Adam and Eve's story, an extremely important, I think, feature of that story is that it did not used to mean the meaning that we ascribe to it. It used to mean something totally different. It used to mean a couple totally different things. The people who originally wrote it, who compiled it, who redacted it. The story has had a dozen different lives. It's been used to bludgeon women and commit atrocities to hurt them. And now we honor Eve as wiser beyond her capacity, potentially resonating with some deep idea.
Mm-hmm.
And in its original, and not one of its original forms, because there are multiple accounts given that have different objectives. It's mostly just where did people come from, and why don't snakes have any legs? But we chose to put that story in that frame, because that is what was really, really powerful to us in the burning cauldron that Mormonism comes out of the Enlightenment. This understanding, ignorance is a really bad idea. We've made some really poor choices, and hey, like, guys, what if we read Genesis this way? And that's, I think, a wonderful way to appreciate our scriptures. Is
thank you.
We use them as we need to, and that's valid and powerful and speaks to eternal truths.
Thank you, Rael. I as I think about scripture, like one really interesting way of thinking about it is that it's sort of this collective library that has come along with us throughout history. And, we just started reading the Old Testament in church for those of us who are following along with that. And, we saw our Sunday school teacher struggle with like how to introduce it, right? Because there are weird things in the Old Testament, right?
So just say so and smile.
And one of the things that's really, I think, interesting about the canon in general is that it's not just this thing that we read, but it's also this thing that we keep and we maintain and we repeat. And I think it's meant for us to brush up against and experience and try to figure out what it means. And one of the conclusions we came to in our Sunday school class was like, if it serves no other purpose than just to show us how far we've come,
Jesus was dealing with.
It might still be useful in for that reason. I think there are probably many other valuable uses besides, but
Sorry,
it is interesting.
I don't understand. I think I don't understand.
I think what I mean by that is that some people look back at the Old Testament, especially, and some of the sort of very harsh lessons there, and they don't know how to make sense of it. They think like, why did God want people to do this and that kind of thing, and they struggle to know like how much to attribute to God and how much to attribute to other things. For example, Joseph Smith struggled with this when he was doing what we call the Joseph Smith translation of the Bible. So he read the parts where it talks about Pharaoh and persecuting the children of Israel, and he didn't like the way it said God hardened Pharaoh's heart. So he changed the text.
What's he like about it?
He thought that it violated Pharaoh's agency. He wanted Pharaoh to be evil on his own and not because not because God made him evil, right? So he's like, this is wrong. We need to fix this.
Okay.
I got your back on that.
And by the way, we have folks here who are not Latter-day Saints.
Unbelievable.
So Francel came from a Jewish background, so like some of this is new, right? So anyway,
Yeah, I feel like there's a version of it that it's not agency robbing. It's just like Pharaoh's an instrument of God in that moment that we
Sure.
talked about, where it was like God needed to test the Jewish people, so he was able to sort of like put Pharaoh in a trance. Maybe I mean that's fine. Where it's not my former Hebrew school principles, where it's like that's sort of like, you know, I guess usurp agency momentarily to do that.
so anyway, Joseph Smith didn't like that, so he's like, no, Pharaoh made this decision himself, right? Anyway, go ahead.
I mean, I love the Old Testament a lot more before I taught the Old Testament.
Oh yeah,
And started studying the history of it and
uh-huh.
when it was written, why it was written, who wrote it, how many hundreds of years after events before it at certain times. But I wonder if I just wonder if we looked at it more for what it actually was. We've named it the Old Testament. And it certainly wasn't named that when it started.
Yeah, this is another.
What actually is it and why was it not?
This is another fun thing that came up in our lesson was nobody lived in the past. I love this phrase. David Nicole, a famous historian, said nobody lived in the past, right?
Nobody called Warbler 1 Warbler 1.
Right. They were all experiencing it just as it happened, right? And it's only with
I don't think you live in the
retrospect.
past now. I feel like that constant. What you say?
But what's fascinating about this is where was I going with this? So
I can take it a direction.
George,
know,
have a comment out of here.
so
It's on the same lines too.
yeah, I mean, all I was trying to say is that part of our struggles with the Old Testament is that we don't have the vantage point that the people who wrote it had. And so we see the law of Moses, for example, as being extremely strict and harsh. But in fact, it was like an improvement on the status quo. So the law of Moses was designed to restrict the amount of punishment you could inflict in response to a given infraction. So, for example, it wasn't uncommon for people who had somebody do something mean to them to go and kill their entire village in vengeance, right? And so the law of Moses said, no, if someone steals from you, the most you can do is cut off their hand, right? If someone takes out your eye, the most you can do is take out their eye, right? So a lot of folks think of it as super harsh, but if what you did in the past was actually kill somebody who happened to take your eye out, then, that was an attempt to limit, improve things. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, significantly, this title that Christianity gives the Hebrew Bible of the Old Testament shoves it into the past. And you know how the past was. The people were dumb and mean and stupid. And so we read it as though people were doing dumb, mean, evil things. And no, they were people and they were doing things and they handled the scriptures the same way you do. And they, but yeah, this Christian framing of the Old Testament as old is a way that we accidentally put them in the past in
right. And
an appropriate way. We don't read it like they would read it, partially because of the work that Christianity does to see it as preliminary rather than as other communities see it, who like Hillel, to not actually be a Jew here, but to talk about Judaism, Hillel, possibly who the Jesus tradition is really inspired by, is asked to explain what the Bible is about, what's the Hebrew Bible about, and it's going to go into a long explanation. It says, no, stand on one foot and explain it to me before you lose your balance. And he basically just gives the golden rule. This is quite a bit prior to Jesus. The people working with this library don't use it to justify genocide
Mhm.
every day, like it encourages you to do, and say, cool, like, you know any Moabites? You better go kill them, because like no Moabite can be allowed to live. No any witches?
Moabites here in
Kick 'em out. So people who are engaging with this are responding to it in like the healthy ways that we try to respond to it. But I don't remember exactly where I started back. Well,
What I want to say quick in response to some of this really fast before we move topic is I don't want to imply that we're so enlightened and we're so smart and are so much better than the ancients who wrote the Old Testament, because for one thing, like there were some really smart people in those eras. Like let's look at Archimedes in ancient Greece. Like probably not very many people who've ever lived were as smart as he was. At least when it comes to geometry and and so their mental capacity, I would say, is like equal. They had brilliant people just like we do, but I think the cultural shift has changed a lot, and we need to recognize that like a lot of what we think of as being more enlightened really is a cultural legacy that we've inherited that we shouldn't take full responsibility for. Yeah, go ahead.
So, along that same line, I think a certain amount of humility
Sure, yeah,
is a
absolutely.
sign of maturity, right? And so if you think about what happens in different, to use a Mormon word like dispensations, the most recent one tends to see previous testaments not in the way that the people who used them at the time saw them, as infallible, like given from God, letter by letter, word for word, like perfect and complete. But they see them as, no, these were, human documents that were made by people, and they were just doing the best they could with the tools they had to explain the world and to try to guess the mind of God. But what we have now, no, that's perfect, right? Like this is infallible.
Yeah.
And so
learn the one lesson.
Yeah, right. So the cool thing about Mormonism is, unlike other Christians, Mormons don't just see the Old Testament that way; they see the whole Bible that way.
Yeah,
right.
And the Book of Mormon and Doctrine and Covenants.
Well, hopefully they ought
don't
to.
understand
yes.
their religion otherwise.
Well,
But
they-
yeah, I
they
think
see what the Mormons are saying that way.
Yeah.
So on that note, like,
There was one more thing.
go ahead. Go ahead.
And so along with that humility, right, is also the understanding that like our human nature is not something that only exists for other people, right? It also exists for us, and that human nature is an old program, like you said earlier, right? Like we are running on outdated software, and some of the software that we need in order to live in Zion obviously has not been written yet.
Yeah.
And it may be so foreign from what we're used to that it may be terrifying to us.
Sure.
It may feel existentially like this is the end to us.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's also somewhere where we need to be a little bit, humble and just realize like, we may not know the solution when we see it because it may be super scary to us. Especially people who are in a position of privilege at this moment, because it may mean the end of the life that they've enjoyed. It doesn't mean that they're going to now be poor and be at the bottom of some sort of hierarchy. No, it just means that they're not going to be, on the top of the heap anymore. And that I think especially applies to men. If you look at, you were talking about medicine making us more virtuous. A great example of that is antidepressants. So you look at, rates of child abuse in households, and there's a much lower rate of child abuse and domestic violence in households where the father or the husband or whatever is on an antidepressant, right? Like it may just be correlation or whatever, but maybe there's more to it than that, maybe there is something about maleness that is not good. That might need to change in order for us to live in Zion. I have a lot of, it is terrifying to think like maybe men are really like a big impediment to us living in the right world that we want to live in.
It's a lot
And
of
that we-
truth about the natural man.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard. It's really hard to justify away the fact that like 98% of violent crime is committed by men. It's really hard to say that that's just socialization, right? Really hard.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think
It's
Cross cultures.
biological power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This minute gets really sticky because if you dig into that, like bell curve, like men spread wider than
Yeah,
women
sure.
in terms of behavior.
Yeah.
So like 98% of all crimes are committed by men in that case, but there's a far tail end, so it doesn't reflect the center. But I do agree there is something that is there that needs to be solved. I don't like calling it a problem in as much as it's circumstantially beneficial and circumstantially like negative.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
So you know,
it is with women.
it's kind of a joking thing that I
Sure,
say,
sure, sure.
but you know, I have patients all the time, men mostly, who ask me like, what can I do to extend my life? And I said, well, I have a trick that can give you probably another 10 to 15 years.
And
easy.
balls.
And they're like, what is it? And I was like, castration. And they're like, oh yeah, no, I'm good, thanks. I have one
Getting
patient so
married.
far.
Get
Yeah,
married.
yeah,
and
yeah, that's true.
that's a better one.
Yeah.
It's not 10 to
If you
15
do both at the
years.
same time, then you get both.
All right. There's one thing I wanted to say in response to something you said earlier, which was I can't remember who expressed it, but a concern about the Book of Mormon, and we were talking about the amendability of our scripture, right? The tentativeness of our scripture, and I think that reminded me that like we are in the process of migrating all of the cool quotes that we've collected over the years onto a single source. And it's almost out. It's really awesome. Get really excited about it. In fact, you can already see previews of it if you go to like new.transfigurism.org. Our normal website is at transfigurism.org, but just add new to the front of it. Anyway, some of the great quotes that we've collected talk about scripture and what the Latter-day Saint conception of scripture is. But the Book of Mormon itself says, like, I will speak unto all nations of the earth, and they shall write it, and the world will be judged by the books that are written. And it talks about far more than just the scriptures we already have, but this sense that, like, every single nation has inspired writings that belong in the canon, so to speak. Not necessarily that they're recognized as canonical, but that, like, if we were to know all the things that God has revealed, we would want to add them. And we also have stories in the Book of Mormon where, like, you know, Jesus comes to the Nephites and he says, where are Samuel's writings? And they're like, it seems like they're sort of caught a little flat-footed there. And they're like, we got, you know.
He's a layman, you know.
and so, you know, there is this sense that, like, that prophecy and revelation is being given to people that maybe the mainstream did not fully recognize and acknowledge as prophets. And I think that applies to us now as well, that there are prophetic things that are happening even now. And so, like, Brigham Young himself said, if the Book of Mormon were to be revealed again, it would differ in many instances from what it says now. He says the people are only able to receive what you know God is like. God can only give them what they're ready to hear. Mm-hmm. And so this notion that scripture would always like be invariably the same is very much not a part of the early Latter-day Saints. Yeah.
I want to add too that Mormonism has its own temporally condensed version of an Old Testament or ancient scripture, and that's the Journal of Discourses. And a lot of people think, oh, that's where all the crazy stuff is. And it is. There's a lot of crazy stuff in there, but there's also a lot of inspiring stuff in there. Mm-hmm. And I think that too often when we're concerned about finding perfection in scripture, or when we're trying to find flawless answers or superlative gods, the scriptures will constantly disillusion us. Mm-hmm. But if we go into them, reading them as one human reading what another human wrote, hoping to express the words of inspiration, hoping to channel that sublime aesthetic, hoping to move you with what moved them, then all of this makes more sense. And then when we read the Old Testament of Mormonism, the Journal of Discourses, we see how we got here more clearly. Not only because of the inspiring stuff, but because of crazy. And all of that works together to get us here in a more meaningful way. And if we knew the Old Testament world as well as we know early Mormon world, I think we would see the same thing. We would see the crazy and we would love it just as much as the inspiring, because it tells you how you got there.
Yeah.
And so it would be a tragedy, in my opinion, if we were ever to stop using the Old Testament, if we were ever to refuse to use the doctrine of the Journal of Discourses, because there is so much of God in all of that, the real God, not the superlative Greek form that people want to imagine as God, the real God that really moves us, that really creates us, that we are really becoming like, is in those scriptures. I've experienced that.
If we get rid of all our crazy, we won't have anything left.
That's right. Crazy's part of God.
I love that. Yeah, Spencer.
I wanted to ask you about celestial forensics.
Oh yeah.
So I guess as we go back, millennia, I would think that fidelity gets like worse and worse, right?
Sure.
And there's this concept in Mormonism of God will help us, create a genealogy or something of what we can't recreate on our own. Is there consensus among Mormon transhumanists, or maybe a few ideas about are those people in the ancient past doomed to never, be resurrected? Or we talk about convergence of different, worlds or whatever. Do we ever consider a vertical convergence where we're gonna meet our creators and maybe they'll help us, resurrect our ancient ancestors?
I definitely think that possibility is something we've considered, but another possibility that is complementary to that one is something that has been called, not just by Mormon transhumanists, but by others as well, quantum archaeology. It's sort of the idea, if you think about it, somewhere out in space is light that came from our planet 100,000 years ago. Somewhere out in space, right? And so all of these things that occurred a long time ago are somewhere, somehow, right? And quantum archaeology is just the notion that it may be possible with a much more advanced technology than we currently have to sort of peer into the little folds of space-time and actually see traces of what has come before. And even cosmologists like Carl Sagan and Stephen Hawking and others have speculated that time travel in a sort of read-only sense, where you could go back in time potentially and review things that might have happened in distant past, that is theoretically possible. It would require insane amounts of energy that we don't have access to right now, but perhaps gods might have access to that kind of technology. So that's another way that people have speculated about the possibility of going back enough to reproduce at an atomic level, exactly what existed in a certain time and place. But I think it's important to point out that there's still really difficult choices to be made in the resurrection. For example, if we resurrected all the mosquitoes that have ever lived, the planet would be piled high in 50 miles of mosquitoes. And I don't want to live in that kind of heaven, right? So, do you?
No, I say my very founded theological theory is the reason outer darkness is dark is because after all the mosquitoes.
Amen.
I like it.
His mother doesn't get resurrected.
So I think this is important to point out that maybe we're going to have a cutoff at like our 112th cousin once removed who's like a mollusk, and we're going to say, you don't make the cut, you know? So I'm like,
What if the mosquitoes are like sampling all of humanity in that time? Yeah, that's
That's actually their purpose.
well, that was in Jurassic Park, right? That was how they found the old dinosaurs in Jurassic Park, right?
I think on a serious level, we can ask ourselves, you know, if we have a capability of scanning the past somehow, let's just call it quantum archaeology, and that's a little bit of magic thinking for a second. Whatever it is, whatever we do to scan the past, if we have enough to resurrect dead persons from that information, then we actually have enough information to query that person before we resurrect them and know, does that person want to be resurrected? Do they have a conception of resurrection? Do they have a desire to be resurrected? And I think we can extend that. I think we can just extend that.
Go ahead, just say it. Just say
Well,
it.
let me finish. This is very important.
Sure.
We can extend that out to an ethics of what should and should not be resurrected. Does someone even have a conception of resurrection? Does it want to be resurrected? If not, there's not a moral obligation to resurrect that mosquito.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
just wonder where we've gone because I think of resurrection, it's like, I'm thinking of my Jessiness, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And my Jessiness doesn't, I feel like never leaves. So I feel like my Jessiness will always.
His name is Jesse, by the way.
So whether I'm,
Like Jesse James, like one of them. Anyway.
oh, yeah. So whether I'm
Sorry.
incorporated.
Steve's got something too. Keep going.
Yeah, I just say whether I'm incorporated into this body, you know, or we figure out as transhumanists how to extend this
Actually,
longer. I think that we're always free at some point, because I liked where you were going, and I thought about this a lot before, is Jesus figured out how to resurrect. So he figured out how that process happens. And I don't think any of us, I think we're a fairly educated group here. I'm not resurrecting these atoms today.
Yeah.
Because they're going to be
Actually,
long gone.
What you just said, and I'll get to you, Stephen, in just a sec, but that's a really important point to bring up, and it's actually been debated for millennia, okay? There's a common Greek concept called the ship of Theseus, and it's this question of like, Theseus has a ship, and let's say that they keep maintaining the ship, and eventually like no plank on the ship is part of the original ship. Is it still the same ship, right? And the Latter-day Saints were also very concerned after crossing the plains that some folks died along the way and it was frozen ground and they didn't have a chance to be buried. And some of them got eaten by wolves or other animals. And they were saying, what's going to happen to our loved ones? Their body has been desecrated, you know? And there was a lot of debate about this. And the ultimate... it continued. Like they didn't resolve the debate, but there were some people who insisted that no, the precise atoms that were a part of that person are brought back. But then other people were right. Well, then
They were the mollusks.
I know. I'm getting there. Then other people were saying like, but wait, like if you know anything about the body, you know that you're not even made out of the same atoms that you had 10 years ago. And so
Yesterday.
Yeah,
We came from stars.
right, and so clearly, I think my view, and I think this would make sense, is that what makes you is more the pattern that is you, and not the particular atoms that you're made of, right? And so
to infer the pattern.
that would be something that we would need
There's a
to
different
figure out how to restore.
source or something finer than what we
Yeah, Steve. You've been waiting.
Finally got it. Yeah. Well, so when I was probably 12 or 13, I don't remember the exact age, but I had this conversation with my mom. I was wrestling with these concepts of God.
Yeah.
At one point, I asked her, so if we are to become as God, and I am not God, but I become God, then I'm no longer Steve. And so I bring this idea, and she's like, well, I guess that's true. And it was interesting. So I'm like, do I want to become God then? In as much as my Steviness, right? Does not exist, because there's parts of us, parts of our personalities, or what we ascribe to a personality is those weaknesses or things that would be burned out. And there's various people that have talked about this now, like, is that your true identity, right? In this ethereal spiritual sense. But what I'm getting at is, here we are talking about transformation, and we think we have our hands on the reins. We don't. Like, in as much as we're becoming this being which transcends us, we are yielding to a force which will usher us into a new state that is not us and will not be us, and is something entirely different.
So, but
Where we are.
You're not you, my child. Gentle change.
I want to. I don't.
I think from a psychosocial perspective, you're still Steve.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with this, Steve. Like, I feel like
Identify with it all.
it's definitely true that like you're influenced by other people, and I would say including God. God is one of the people that's influencing you, and even that word itself. We just talked about how there are many gods in the
Well, I guess
but
what I'm
like
saying, it's the necessity of death in transformation, right? So that this is like when you go and do therapy, right? Like you're trying to essentially reframe something that happened, and the story is entirely different.
yeah,
And as much as the story stays the same, you stay the same. Things
yeah,
have to be put to rest for something new to be born.
yeah.
Since sure, like you still have your memories and those that work, but we don't remember our previous lives, and when we do, we will be different for those memories, right? So then it's like, what is our identity now? The veil is gone. We shall be different.
What is identity?
So, and what is life is a finite, like, dot on a speck of existence, which is eternal, and we think that dot will do
Chris, you have something on
that it will not. That's what I'm saying.
So,
Right.
first of all, this is our first time here.
Yeah.
We are so glad because we only talk about this amongst ourselves. So these exact conversations. So this,
I love crazy.
So this debate we have that we disagree on is, I say, what you think of as Chris is the boy whose parents got divorced, whose dad became schizophrenic and abandoned him, whose first wife abandoned him. My genetics that have so much of my personality I've learned through doing genetic testing and run it through AI. My personality is wrapped around my genetic mutations and bodily malfunction. So if I have a perfected body and I am healed of those hurts, what is my real self? And in heaven, then, are we all the same, like the beehive state of the beehive drones?
There were different bees, right? Like each one has their own
So I
function.
think we're going to be the same, and I don't like it, but all truth to me points to we will be very similar. Ashley hates that and doesn't like that idea, and I don't like it, but I think it might be.
So I wanna push back on that a little bit, and also on the idea that like I agree that is a transformation and that we're not fully in control, but I think we're not completely out of control as well. But like on the notion of
On identity, we're amazingly in control.
I
get to say, you get to say.
Yeah, on the notion of is heaven, is everyone the same in heaven? I feel, this is my personal take on this. I feel that for one thing, like that would go against a lot of things we've already been taught. For one, I'm thinking of the parable of the body of Christ and how there are like lots of different members of the body. But also, I think of heaven as a place where we can tolerate difference more because we're more Christ-like, we're more loving. And so somebody who's really a real oddball that would have been like rejected in society today, like might have a place there because we understand each other better, we appreciate each other better, we're more loving. So I actually think it would increase our ability to tolerate differences. And in fact, I think the atonement itself is not talking about forcing people to be all the same, but actually learning how to tolerate discrepancies to bridge the gap between different individuals. Yeah. Who's next? I don't know.
Yeah.
Sylvia.
No, that's for me the same sociality which is here is there,
Mhm.
right? And that means like as much as you're talking about like heaven is here and now,
Yeah, I
and
know.
all of those great quotes, like here and now is there also. And so if you have fought against whoever, you're not going to magically just get over it because you died, right? Like
Book of Mormon says that explicitly.
right, you still have to get over it, and like the wars and the problems and the like natural condition doesn't just get yeeted out of us because we died, right? Like, so I think like for me, leaning on that, like that same sociality.
Can someone define yeet for me? I hear it a lot, and I'm just not sure what it.
Just imagine.
It's like the trove.
Thank you.
Thanks for the bottle.
Descriptor.
That's not the most common.
Right. But that realization is really motivating to being like, here and now matters so much. We cannot just hang out, drink mansions above, whatever else. Because if we're not doing the here and now, heaven's gonna suck, dudes. Like, it's not going to be fun if you aren't actually doing something to create heaven here on earth.
Yeah. Nathan, did you have something?
Yeah, I think.
Sorry, wrong Nathan.
The problem with well, we become a different person. I mean, we're always becoming different people, but it's the continuity. It's the lack of continuity that I think is frightening.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know how to.
Yeah, it does need
We
to
have a
be.
solution for that. The solution is that we're already constructing identity between us right now. We don't need to think of identity as something that's like atomic or something imposed on us. We construct it socially and individually all the time. And if you change faster than we can keep up with, your identity will disappear. We'll no longer identify you as Nathan, and rightly we'll just say, okay, psychosocially, Nathan's dead or gone or annihilated or traveling. He's not here. And so I don't think we have a gigantic problem with this when we realize that identity is something that we have to change together.
Well, I mean, the present a little bit more. Like, let's say I die, and you guys come back and create Nathan again. Like, there's a psychological question there. It's like, is that really me? Just because you created me in that same pattern.
I have that question of you right now. Were you Nathan yesterday that went to sleep and did the Matrix architect put some other weird spirit into you?
Right?
I can come up with crazy things like that to say. But the fact is, you and I are both confident that you're Nathan and I'm Lincoln. And the whole room is. Yeah, I say that's all that's required for identity ever. That's all we ever get anyway.
We just program everyone to be confident that they're themselves.
God, we do. There's nothing else.
Nathan Cannon had something here. What?
No, well, this is actually a little bit going
Are we
backwards.
talking about you, by the way, or Nathan here?
No, now we're talking about Nathan.
Identity crisis.
No, but I just think like it's just an important thing to always consider is actually like what the Mormon definition of a god is based off of the requirements to be a god.
Okay.
And when you look at Doctrine and Covenants, I think it's 130, whichever one is the one that talks about eternal marriage. Yeah, 132. That requires multiple individuals for God to exist. It says that you cannot be a god if you are not in a sealed relationship. So God actually requires multiple people. So I think it's really interesting in that, like, if we're like worried about like all being the same person, that actually would be a worry if God was defined as a single individual.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, when you define God as multiple people, I mean, for example, like I go to my mom if I'm wanting some like emotional support, and that's great. But that also means typically she's not going to go to logic right away and just be like, let me explain all your problems. Like she's going to be like, but here, I'll give you like a back row. I'm going to be like, this is okay. If I go to my dad,
he's going to explain.
No, but if I want like solutions to my problem, I go to my dad. But the thing is,
he's like, you got a nail in your forehead.
Yeah, exactly. But
I don't know the nail.
the problem is like, if you were to make her suddenly like way more logical, well, like, and you are a logical person, but I'm saying like making her like go to that all the time, or make my dad super like touchy feely all the time. For me, that wouldn't make them more perfected. The fact that they are different and that they work together is actually what makes
Yeah, I love that. I love that too.
It's like one of the best compliments I think.
John, did you have something?
Yeah, just as quote from the C.S. Lewis. He says, good as it ripens becomes continually more different, not only from evil, but from other good.
Yeah.
And so I really like the idea of like,
Who said that?
C.S. Lewis.
Yeah.
Good as it ripens.
Can you email me that? Because we want to add that to our quote collection. We've got lots of good quotes and I just want to keep
Yeah, just like the idea that
Yeah, Jeff.
I just like the idea that as evolution progresses and as we become more ethical, we are able to tolerate difference and diversity, and then that means that what we need a lot more of is difference and diversity.
Yeah. Jeff, did you have something?
Oh, I was just gonna say like 2 points on like the idea that we become more similar. I think in one regard we do in some ways become more similar, but I think also like if you looked at the diversity of people we have now versus like 100 years ago, like we have way more jobs, people have way more broad interests, and then in addition, just because we have more number and because of the variation like genetically of everyone, right? I guess besides identical twins, we have way more uniqueness among humanity than we have in any other prior competition.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Oh, and if we wanted to split into smaller groups, I guess we could announce that like people could if they're
Either way, I mean,
okay.
I think
Jordan was
people
about
seem
to
like they're
counter
on
that. It sounds
Oh, we should
Personally, I think,
small groups
I think our diversity as a species has actually dramatically decreased since the Great Discovering.
because of the fact that we don't have unique cultures anymore. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, if you look at the number of distinct languages that are spoken,
Oh, I see.
cultures that exist, I mean, it's we're becoming a
Yeah.
monoculture.
I kind of agree, but I think there was something to be said as well for like if you had a population of like much higher and you could sustain it ethically, you might get a lot more Mozarts, a lot more Einsteins, like I don't know, just statistically speaking. But Jeff, did you want to?
That's it. Awesome.
Sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to hear what Jeff has to say.
Me too.
Yes.
No.
Wait,